Good morning. This is Richard Edelman from New York. I'm pleased to welcome you to our special report today about brands amidst crisis. I wanted to talk to you about some of the findings that we've had over the past months. You know, this is our 10th study this year because things have been changing so quickly in the face of COVID, the major global recession, and also systemic racism. And so here are 5 observations from the prior studies. The first is that we have belief-driven buyers. The second is that we have brands that they can trust. The third is that brands are to speak up. The fourth is that people are changing brands if the brands actually are acting on behalf of the consumer in the face of COVID. And lastly, a brand gains 5 times more trust from speaking up and acting than it does from putting head down. So we've been to 8 markets in the last 2 weeks. We had Brazil, Canada, China, France, Germany, India, UK, and US. We had 8,000 respondents. We also did a 3-market qualitative study, basically focus groups in India, UK, and US. And so here are the findings of the study just out of the field. Observation 1, fears shift how people buy products. Specifically, the fear factor has escalated about me and my family health, what the future will be like for me and my family, whether my kids are getting the proper education during lockdown, also me and my family's mental health, and lastly, violence and civil unrest. The shift in fears upward has caused a major change in values. We see that values of security, family, happiness all matter more. So protect my family, 42-point jump since the beginning of the year, spending time with our loved ones. Also making smart purchasing decisions, value for money. Lastly, trying to find joy and happiness and being in control of my future. Here's a very important slide. Image matters less. Specifically, owning a brand communicates that I'm successful, down 11 points, that I'm a tastemaker, down 9 points, that I associate the brand with excitement, down 5 points. What's up? Values such as safety, purpose. So, value for money, putting consumer safety first and care more about purpose than profit. Here's the story. Brands as Superman and Superwoman. Brands are expected to solve both societal problems and personal problems. Look at the unanimity across the globe, whether it's India and China or Canada and France and the US, across age groups, genders, and income. It's the same for personal issues or societal issues. Next slide. Here's a big change. You'll remember 2 years ago, brand trust was number 6 on the purchase criteria. Today, it's second, just after good value for money and better quality tied for first. And we've had a huge jump in the regard of trust as a purchase criteria. Here it is, 28-point jump in a year. Look at the jump in markets, unanimously 20 points or more, again, cross age groups, gender, and income groups. Trust in the brand matters now as the focal point of purchase. Here's what happens when brands are trusted. And brands get trust by alleviating fears and addressing uncertainties. By 4 to 1, you see an impact. Brand trust is ability of the brand, dependability of the brand, integrity, purpose, and also what it means for myself. And I would argue at the moment that purpose and integrity matter more than ever. What does brand trust get you? It gets you all 3 of engagement, loyalty, and advocacy. So I'm more willing to share my personal data. I'm more willing to buy a product even if it's not the cheapest. and I'm certainly more willing to recommend the brand and defend it if it gets in trouble. A how-to for brands. How do we get to trust? How do we act in order to ease fears? Check this out. Brands are seen as more powerful, effective, creative, and responsive than government. Now, that's a low bar in some markets, but brands can do more to solve social ills, have better ideas, and it's easier for them to get things done. That's a big new responsibility for Superman and Superwoman brand. However, a bit of disappointment with what brands are doing in solving the problems. High expectation, low delivery. How do we get there? We've got to build trust by doing things, by putting actions over words. In specific, it means that we have to take actions that help workers and local communities in this time of crisis. Don't promise and then do and then talk. Support me, support my community. Specifically, give me good information about COVID. Be empathetic to me at a time of hardship. Make it easy for me to work at home, and make sure that we have employee training programs, because I'm afraid of getting replaced by automation or other. Also support my community. Donate supplies for schools. Find better ways to educate kids. Celebrate inclusivity, but make diversity happen within the four walls of your company. I expect that. I also want you to have the right tone when you talk to me. I am not interested in kind of image advertising. Next. You have my attention. A big jump in the last 2 years in whether people pay attention to marketing, whether advertising or other communications. Next slide. But it is not the time for celebration. Be careful about how you play the holidays. I want a restrained and subdued tone. I don't want some kind of happy image when people are theoretically going to have to be locked down again. I also want you to talk to me through trusted channels and trusted voices. You've heard me talk many times about the importance of expertise. I'm going to now show you why that matters. 7 in 10 people tell us we're avoiding advertising. We're changing our media habits. We're going to streaming. We're using ad blockers. If you want to get trust, it's about personal experience, earned media, or peer conversation. Paid is 1/3 as important as personal experience. Tell your story through friends and family and peers. Don't go to think about, we're going to lead through advertising. It's not going to work. You're not going to ease my fears. Focus on societal solutions and not political. And I want to spend a specific amount of time on this one. I understand it's a Venn diagram. I understand that what I may call societal, someone else might call political. I think the safe things for brands to consider are sustainability, diversity, systemic racism, gender, education, health. If you start getting into issues like guns, you're starting to get into political. I would urge you to be careful on the politics. In countries like America, it's an even divide. It's similar in other markets, Britain, etc. So where are you safe? Again, climate change, the challenges of economics from the pandemic, poverty, etc. Next slide. So how do brands earn trust amidst this crisis? Our values have changed profoundly. We care about personal security. We care about economic security. We care about quality of life. It's not about image anymore. It's about the reality of what we present. We have to reset our marketing approach. It has to be action and then communications. The tone has to change. We have to reflect the present moment. We have to be empathetic. We have to be fact-based, and we have to use expert voices and credible channels to present our material. I want to leave you with a thought that I'm inspired by. It's a quote from George Bernard Shaw, and I want each of the people on this call to put this up in your minds about what the job of brands is today. Some men see things as they are and say, why? I dream things that never were and say, why not? That's our mission. Jax, over to you.
Sorry about that, on mute. The most said sentence of the year. Thank you, Richard, for that. And the inspiring quote. I'm Jackie Cooper. I work as a senior advisor for Edelman. I've had a long career in communications, in brand strategy, and I'm delighted to welcome our panel today. We have Olivia Ross Wilson, who's the Global Communication Director of Inga, the Inga Group and IKEA. We have Stacey Harris, who's a US marketing lead for the GSK pain portfolio. And we have Yanni, and I'm not going to mess up saying his beautiful great Greek name, surname. We have Yanni Kay, who's our own Chief Data and Analytics Officer. So Olivia, you've been with the Inga Group and IKEA since 2011, having joined to lead position around sustainability, now responsible for communication across the group and the positioning of IKEA, active in issues related to gender equality and diversity with 20 years communications experience. And prior to joining Inga, worked for the Clinton Foundation, Bloomberg Philanthropies and Marks and Spencers. Thank you so much for joining. Stacey is the marketing lead for the US pain portfolio, which includes Advil, Excedrin and Voltaren. Responsible for leading strategies for brand management, digital marketing and innovation commercialization. Stacey, you were previously the Director for Expert Marketing and Marketing Director for Digestive Health, and prior to GSK spent time at Colgate-Palmolive and J&J's McNeil's Consumer Healthcare. Welcome. Yanni, 20 years based on this fundamental principle that data can help brands build a stronger relationship with people. Previously, Yanni was the Global Chief Analytics Officer at Wunderman Thompson, and he has vertical industry experience across insurance, healthcare, financial services, retail, banking, and B2B businesses. Everyone that's on this call today, thank you so much for joining. We do have a Q&A box, so if you'd like to ask questions as we go through, hopefully we will have time at the end to bring some of those to the panel. So having just seen this hot off the press data from Richard, very much on trust in challenging times, that overriding theme that we've heard is that fears are shifting what people value and why they actually buy. Security, family and happiness all matter more. There's also this increased expectation for brands to help solve societal and business problems, often where consumers feel government won't step up. 62%, which is a very high percentage, have said they won't make it through this crisis, they feel, unless we as brands play a critical role in addressing the challenges that we face. Let's find out how our panel feels about how brands are playing a role at this time of what you could say is a whole marketing reset. So Olivia, if I can go to you first, IKEA has had one of the longest histories in standing for purpose since its inception in 1976. And you were explaining to me that this has always been really very much beyond a theoretical topic, that it's been driving the business all along to sort of deliver real change and very much action driven. We're all so much home based now with this crisis. So is this crisis a dream or a challenge for IKEA?
It's an interesting one, and thank you, Jackie. I think I don't think anybody would really say that a crisis is a dream, and of course reflecting a lot on what Richard was saying earlier, the impact on global health, the impact on people's lives and the economy has fundamentally reset probably not only marketing but probably total society for generations to come. But I think we do see it as a chance to deliver to our vision, which is to create a better everyday life for the many people. Now, this was written by Ingvar, our founder, many decades ago. But we also see that that became even more relevant. So we actually went back to those foundational basics. We went back to why are we here? And that is our why, our purpose. We saw it as an opportunity to deepen trust, which is a core measure of ours, and I can come back to that later. And when we regrouped to say, what in this moment of time where more than a third of the world's population are locked down and in their homes, and we are in the life at home business, what is our role, and what is the role that we have the right to contribute to? So we really stepped in and looked at, to your point, Richard, how do we make sure that we're supporting our co-workers in the best way possible and our operations so that we can pivot from a very store-based operations into a full transformational shift into e-commerce. We also pivoted to supporting people's lives at homes. When you've got people, I'm sure everybody on the call today, teaching, working, everything, entertaining, everything happened in the home. So how can we help you with ideas, with content, with solutions to make your everyday life that little bit easier? That was the second thing. And then the third thing that we also focused on was looking at the support that communities needed. To your point on vision, we did not need to go out to our co-workers and say, what can we do to support our communities? They went out and did it. No permission, no strategy needed. It was an action of culture and values. And they went out and they donated to women's abuse centres, they donated to hospitals, they converted entire hospital floors into places that people could feel at home. This was us living from our vision, from our purpose, without any permission needed. And we also saw that when sales started to pick back up, what would the right thing for us to do in that moment where we had said that we would take some government furlough money to support co-workers' jobs for as long as possible? But if we were to turn a profit, would it be right that we held on to that furlough money? So we took a decision quite early on and to say, no, we won't. And we went into a very thorough process to repay any money that we received in the government furlough schemes that we were attached to. A big decision, not an easy one, with many dilemmas, but again, coming back to that choice of what is our vision and what's the right thing to do. And then lastly, it also gave us the chance to double down on our sustainability and our quality efforts. We've gone all in on creating a better everyday life for the many people, because a sustainable life at home is a more affordable life at home. And affordability is something that's going to be super crucial for people to meet their needs in the future. And ultimately for society to deliver to the Paris Agreement and to the SDGs going forward. So for us, it's helped to reset our system in order to continue to have a positive role in society. And that's why we're here.
Amazing, thank you, and admirable. Stacey, quite an extraordinary thing happened that you had to deal with at the beginning of this crisis. So you effectively had a sort of crisis within the crisis, when somewhat improbably the French health minister, Olivier Véran, who's a qualified doctor and a neurologist, misleadingly tweeted that taking anti-inflammatory drugs could be an aggravating factor for the infection. This went right to the core of the efficacy and trust of Advil at such a crucial time with the pandemic. Clearly, this needed to be corrected rapidly. When did you obviously, this must have been completely a shock, comes in, and then you addressed it, it seems, with almost forensic detail. Can you explain how you dealt with this and how you went about rebuilding trust in something that's absolutely core at this time in our lives?
So absolutely. Thank you. And thank you so much for having me today. So one of the things that's a core foundation and a pillar at GSK is our ability to really focus on delivering healthcare solutions, but driving trust for our consumers with our brands. So as this was kicking off, immediately, what we did was reach internally to our medical experts. We also went externally to leading experts within the field, but also reaching out to key health authorities to really deep dive and understand. We were in the midst of a global crisis, and it was just kicking off in the US. So first we needed to ensure that what was being said was unfounded, that it was not true, because our patient health and safety is number one and critical in everything we do. So once we had the facts that the information that was tweeted out on social media from France and spilled over into the US was actually misleading information and totally unfounded, we needed to get the facts communicated out. And we worked with experts and leading health authorities, and everyone rallied around to communicate the facts that there was no evidence that using NSAIDs would worsen the conditions associated with COVID. Additionally, it was critical for us as we're looking to maintain and reassure consumers as this very uncertain time was unfolding across the world and in the US. We needed to give them the right information. So we quickly launched a communication plan to provide the right information. It was across both social media, but with leading healthcare and experts. And one of the things that's most important as we talk about how we need to operate, it is about trust. And the brands are not the ones who people needed to hear from. They wanted to hear from experts. They wanted to hear from the leading health authorities on what the facts were around this crisis. And so we took a back seat in the communication and we enabled the leading healthcare authorities and the leading experts to be the ones who were delivering and driving the message that the tweet that was sent out from the Finch ministry was unfounded. There was no supporting evidence. And we're finding that by taking that pause and letting those experts lead the conversation, help to drive trust and reassurance with consumers because we let them speak on behalf of the brand.
Very good. And Yanni, this sort of naturally segues to you because you're often teaching us how the knowledge of exactly what our consumers and our audience are saying is so key in terms of targeting. Because what Stacey didn't want to happen was to have more people knowing about the negative. She just wanted the negative people to know what the truth was and the science, but she didn't want to inflame. So targeting those audiences and helping to build trust in the people who are mistrusting and have been given misleading information is obviously key, but we don't want to inflame the negativity. So can you just talk to the power that we have to control that?
Yes, there is a great hidden data story behind what Stacey talked about, the ability to know with good reads and understanding of who was exposed to the misleading information. So that's the starter. So the ability to communicate to the people who were exposed to the misleading information is number one, and then using that to be able to see who is at higher risk of being exposed to misleading information, and knowing that if you go first into those populations that they're at high risk and you expose them through experts, as Stacey said, to the right information, they're much more unlikely to believe an untruth, falsehood. So using data on the background to be forensic of who you talk to and how you talk to them about becomes a very big part of the effectiveness of not having to take something that is not true and go in a mass market way and create a problem where a problem doesn't need to exist.
So you talk about data with empathy, and we're constantly trying to balance the need for sort of love with the need for information. Olivia, you know, and I were talking about this call, and we talked about the importance of brand love. But like all relationships, at least good ones, you can't have love if you don't have trust. So how does this sort of affect how you position your company and how you decide how you position the messaging around the company, which is your responsibility?
No, I think it's a super good question, and it is something that we say quite a lot, that ultimately trust is personal, and trust is about relationships. And for us, you know, we really want to understand what is the emotional connections that we need to forge here. And one of the things that maybe also building on what you were saying earlier, Richard, with the points that we need to focus on to build trust, there is also something in the everyday experience through every single action, every single interaction that you have with another human, with another brand, with another member of society. That's how you can build or erode trust. So for us, we've taken the societal impact perspective, or the world context, and really brought that back down to a home and then down to an individual level. So what can I do to live a better everyday life, and how can IKEA in turn help to do that? That is absolutely one component. But I can also say that if we haven't delivered on our promises connected to availability or product quality, or really standing up to the expectations that you as a human, as a person would have from this relationship, then we haven't met our part of the deal. So for us, it's really making sure that we understand the societal impact, but we also understand that to make IKEA a brand to buy into and not only from, we really need to get back to the relationships that we have and nurture the trust and build that through every single thing that we say and do. And then ultimately enable you to have a better everyday life at home. It isn't always easy. And sometimes, like every relationship, we might stumble, we might fall. But I think it's how you also come back from those moments each time, because we're committed to the relationships that we want to nurture for generations to come. So not always easy, like any marriage or any relationship, but we always find our way.
Do you think that because there's love with that brand relationship with IKEA, that you get forgiven more quickly if you do make a mistake? Because if there's love, there's forgiveness, rather than it just being a transactional relationship?
Yeah, I mean, there is, we also have some fantastic research around the emotional benefits as well, and where we really can, what are the exact emotions that we want to connect to, and where do people see that we should really be connecting back with them as well. So they are really around freedom and joy and pride and those dimensions. So those are the things that we focus on, not only from a total positioning perspective, but also in the marketing and the tone of voice, which is also said earlier as well. How can we make sure that we're enabling you to have the freedom, the joy, the pride that you have, the safety, the security that you need within your home? And that is something that we get right sometimes, but also not always. And I think the more you've invested and the more we have invested in trust and love, the more we do see that loyalty over time, that forgiveness that you might have in the relationship, the depth of the relationships becomes so much stronger. So I would say that there's probably two things that we really need to go into in our next journey, which is one, what is the leadership component of trust? For us as leaders across the total organization, we need to make sure that trust is one of our core measures. We actually put it on the same level as profitability, cost, all the things that matter, our happy customer score. Trust is up there on that same level. So how do we as leaders in the organization take our responsibility to build and nurture that over time? So it's a leadership journey for one. And then I think it is also when you with all of your best intentions, how do you come back from that? And with a humanistic value. I think your point, Yanni, as well, around making sure that we are data driven and we absolutely will be going forwards. However, we will also be in IKEA people powered. We are going so much deeper into empathy. And we can see 9 times out of 10, when you've hit a crisis point in your relationship with us, if you can talk to a human, if you can connect to another person, if you can feel that trust building in that relationship, that's when you can start to step back into the commitment that you need to be able to buy into us going forwards as well, and likewise in the other direction. So it's definitely a journey, but our ambitions are that going forwards, that trust is something that every single leader in our organization is proud to contribute to, and that it's no longer a thing for the marketing and communication colleagues to solve. So that's how we see it.
That's good. And carrying on with this sort of emotional side, Stacey, one for you. Richard went through slides that show us that we're really scared globally about our physical health, our family's health, our mental health. This is up 36 points since the start of the year. It must actually be a really fascinating but kind of sobering time to be responsible for marketing in a pharma business. How are you managing to react to these sort of this real-time crisis, and how's it affecting the decisions that you're making in marketing?
So it's a great point. And one of the things, just to piggyback a little on what Yanni was saying, leveraging data. So leveraging our data to make sure that we're putting together comprehensive communication opportunities to really reach those consumers, the audiences that are most sensitive and most impacted by the concerns of society today, concerns of their healthcare. And again, putting out messaging that is more health-based, more letting them know the benefits that our products offer as it relates to treating their particular healthcare needs and concerns, but also doing more, as I said, with our leading healthcare experts. So letting the doctors' voices and their recommendations play a larger role. So specifically with Advil, we did that tremendously by developing a comprehensive campaign, really using the data to communicate to audiences that were very sensitive about what was happening so that they had the confidence and the knowing the right information to make the right decisions for their brands. Additionally, one of the things that we did, because when you look at how prior to COVID brands were advertising, particularly Advil, it was one, being very courageous and letting people just live exciting and adventurous lives and they didn't have to worry about their pain. It was very important for us in the midst of this crisis to change how we talk to people. We need it to be reassuring. We need it to be more empathetic and to show them that we understand as best we can the challenges that they're going through, but more importantly, we see the strength that they have to deal with these challenges, and we're there as a brand to support them. So really changing the tone and also the visuals of what we're showing from the brand is critically important. And also, you know, we recently just launched Voltaren, which is the first RX to OTC switch topical to treat arthritis. And we were going to launch that over the summer with a very joyful, really talking about movement. And we had to tone it down because it wasn't the appropriate time. And more importantly, we leaned into our partnership with the Arthritis Foundation, where actually all the pre-sale orders that we received, we donated 100% of those profits to the Arthritis Foundation to work on continuing the research to treat arthritis. So these are ways that today it's very challenging, but how we have to think differently of how we're communicating and engaging in still a very authentic and meaningful way for our consumers.
Thank you. Yanni, we can see that trust is important. I've got an echo for some reason. We can see that trust is important from the data, but is it actually something that we can use in a more practical way? Can we actually use trust to drive strategy rather than it being an outcome from the activities that we make?
Absolutely. I think what makes trust unique is the fact that it has a future forward perspective. It gives organization a future forward perspective versus a backwards view. And that's very important. The other thing that's very important is it is measurable. It's actually measurable and it's a continuum. It's not a yes or a no. It's not a monolith. So you need to understand, you need to measure trust, you need to understand it, and then you need to also manage it, because people move. Every experience, as Olivia said, every experience, every interaction can take away trust or can add trust. So you need to manage actively trust. And to do that, you also need to understand it a layer below. As Richard said earlier, there's drivers of trust. Those drivers are very important to help you change the stories you tell. Ability, dependability, integrity, purpose, and self are different components of trust, and there's different audiences. And our ability to actually measure trust on all the stakeholders that they're important and understand it at that level, so we know what stories to tell. So it's a different story for an audience that is driven by ability, which is more around innovation, versus a different story on an audience that's driven by pure purpose. Even when you tell purpose, you can insert components of innovation in the way you talk about purpose and you talk about sustainability versus helping the community or having an impact at a global level. Lastly, I think what's interesting about trust is that it is connected to commercial impact. So trust is not a theoretical concept that stays at a high level. We can actually connect it to commercial impact. We know through our studies and through our research that people who are on the high level of trust versus the low, when you look at those two extremes, walk into a store, they trust more, they purchase more, they visit the website more, and that actually is a good indication that when you manage the trust equity, you can drive value. Also, what's important from an impact perspective is the fact that when you have trust, you can be brave as a brand. You know you can innovate. You know you can be brave on your creative expression. You know that you can experiment with your messaging because you have that foundation of trust. And I think that's why trust is very strategic, but it can go down into a tactical implementation as well.
That's great. I'm actually going to combine, if that's okay, Olivia, for you, a question that we wanted to ask you, but also matches a sort of extension of a question that's come in from our audience. So the first part is that IKEA has this extraordinary ambition to be the most purposeful company in the world. That's hardly challenging at all. How do you balance that single-minded mission with actually the need to sell day to day? You've got to just sell your furniture. And then how do you actually equate that with the question that we've had from one of our audience members, which is that consumers are so very savvy to the ingredients, raw materials in the products that they buy. How are you leveraging your suppliers to build trust with consumers and deliver against these value shifts? So I guess it's about that sort of marvelous philosophy and ambition, and then bringing it down into the day-to-day and being transparent about what happens at point of sale, and being transparent about where you get your social materials from, and how do you actually make that commercially viable?
Super good. How long have we got? That's my first question. Yeah, look,
120 seconds.
Exactly. Let's see if we can nail it. No, look, it's yeah, aside from giving a thesis on it, look, I think it's a fantastic question, or set of questions there. I think for us, maybe it's because we're wired differently, right? So we are born from a vision. We haven't retroactively just discovered one and created one. So this has been the thing that has been with us to create a better everyday life for the many people for decades and decades. So it is why we're here. It is why we sell what we sell. It is how we sell what we sell. So for us, it's, and it isn't only, it isn't, for us, this isn't about selling. We're not here to sell. We're here to make lives better. And by making homes better, we're making lives better. And by making that better, we're making a better planet. So for us, if it doesn't fit into that category, into those categories, then why are we doing it? We will have very honest conversations. And to your point, Yanni, as well, this all comes back to strategy. So our vision is connected to our strategy. We have bold commitments to be climate positive by 2030. We've got circularity, extremely high ambitions for circularity. So this is what drives our innovation. This is what drives our product development. This is what drives the intention of every single thing that we do. So maybe to Richard's point as well, you've got to do first and talk second. We've probably been doing for 75 years, but we've not been so strong at the telling bit. Because in our, I say as an Australian, but in Swedish humbleness, we've just gone on and done it because this is who we are and what we do. And we shouldn't be boastful. We shouldn't shout about things that maybe we haven't completely solved yet, but we're never going to completely fix climate change, and we're not going to do that alone. So we actually decided consciously a few years ago to start opening up more and more, because we realized this importance of trust down to product level, this importance of making it tangible to me, to make it better for my family and my own healthy life at home and sustainable life at home that I can afford. So it's a journey that we're on to, but we've got to try and unpack 75 years of history and make that super concrete. So we have doubled down on sustainability as a result of COVID-19 and the shifts we're seeing in society. So in the coming 12 to 18 months, you'll see a lot more communication coming down, right down to product level. And we've got a lot to share, and we can be as transparent as people have time for, but we also know that not everybody has time to hear everything we have to say. So we're going to try and find that balance, right? Not overwhelming, making it digestible, making it relevant, deepening the connection. Then I would say one last thing, and that is the importance of participation and dialogue. Nobody has ever been in this situation before. Nobody has ever faced the most important decade of our history. And this is what we all need to stand together on. So a core value for us is togetherness. And we see fundamentally that we can only get to the better society that we're all hoping for if we can join at the table, come together and have a fantastic opportunity for dialogue. And if we do have gaps in what we do with our supplier network, with our customer facing communication, whatever it may be, we want to be at the table to have the dialogue on how can we show up and how can we do better. So I think there is many more opportunities to strengthen our collective wisdom and to get to where we need to get to. So hopefully that will be something we can explore even more.
Amazing, thank you. You do very well. A lot of really interesting information there. And we've got a question for Richard after this, but I just want to throw one to our guest panel. A US, from the audience, a US poll done by Harris in the past week showed that 24% of respondents feel gift giving is more important this year. 57% said it's just as important. So some said it's more, some people said. How would the panel recommend brands approach the commercial aspects of holidays this year? And if I refer you back to the insight that the data showed us, that people are sort of asking us to be respectful of tone and be restrained, but there is also some need for joy and escapism. So the question is, how would the panel recommend brands to approach the commercial aspects of holidays this year? Stacey, you want to go first?
So, yeah, so thank you. I'll take a stab at that. I think we have to take a balanced approach. Brands play a pivotal role in our society, and we do have to be realistic, but also optimistic. So our tone does need to be a bit more balanced, and we need to remind people that everything that we're doing to be safe, everything that we're doing to get through this pandemic is to get to that more joyful time. And so we have to make sure that we still celebrate the moments. They may look different, as this meeting is different, where we're sitting on Zoom. We're still sharing, we still have joy. And I think brands have to help us remind each other that there's joy still in this time, and it's going to continue. So it has to be a little different, but we still have to make sure that we're reminding of what's coming.
So I feel like I'm at the office. Someone's going to start playing me out. I've been told it's 2 minutes. Yanni, can you be quick? Because I still have to ask Richard.
So for me, this is a matter of authenticity. As long as you are authentic and you are consistent, you can actually do what's right for your brand. I think when consumers react negative is when you're one, brand before COVID, and now you are a completely different brand. Like, I remind people all the emails we got the first 60 days of like, we care. You got an email from your barber that they care, or, from people that you've never heard before. Who are you? I've never got an email from you, and now you're getting an email that you care. I think it's about authenticity and try to stay authentic and reading the signals that, Richard talked about on how do you communicate and being, having the perspective of the time we live in, but keeping that authenticity with your brand and consistency, I think is very important.
Olivia?
I don't know what else I can add to my wise panelists' perspectives. I would fully support everything that they say. I think the tone, the balancing, the optimism, the authenticity. I would also say for us, it's going to be relevancy. To really make sure that you're with all the empathy, putting yourself in the shoes of your consumer and making sure that you're understanding where their realities will be. So for us, we're going to be really trying to focus a lot more on relevancy in addition to the authenticity. And I think everybody's looking for a little bit of optimism somewhere.
Yeah. That certainly resonates, and not to go away from optimism and mention the politics word, but Richard, this is our last question for you to end the session with. What is the distinction between, we've talked about this so much ourselves, what's the distinction between an issue and politics? But every issue is political to some extent. For example, climate change could be as political as gun control.
This is a long debate, but there are certain brands that are born political. Ben & Jerry's, Patagonia on sustainability, and they have a privileged position, and a lot of their sales are related to being kind of in the political fray. What I would say is I want to give 4 or 5 examples of brands that have done this well. I think Heineken, after Brexit, by having people from both sides sit down over a beer, helped to heal. Ajinomoto, by having a campaign of take on hate, confronted discrimination and said, buy Chinese food. This idea of the Kung flu is ridiculous. And we need people to support our restaurants. Dove, in the campaign on Father's Day, was advocacy, saying that too many African-American men are in jail and they can't celebrate properly a Father's Day. Quicken Loans, by offering loans to veterans who are homeless, is solving a problem. Lastly, IKEA, with this brilliant campaign that's going to break shortly on secondhand furniture, is about sustainability. I think every one of those is within the remit of societal. We can argue that some of them might bridge into political, but they're in safe ground because they're true to the brand. They advocate in your core constituency. They also stand for your employees and give them the ability to feel good about the company. And I'm happy to have an offline discussion with the person who asked that question, because this is a long one.
That's great. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for our panel. Thank you so much to our audience for being part of today. And we will be circulating information on trust. It will be available on our website. So if you didn't get all the answers, hopefully some of them may be there. And most of all, thank you so much to Olivia, Stacey and Yanni for putting the time in and sharing your brilliant views. And we appreciate it deeply. Thank you so much. Take care, everyone.